So hey guys, I thought we make a video about what are the 10 biggest failures when you rebuild your B6 or your BP engine. On the Duratec side, I would not make a video because I do not see so many people who are repairing or rebuilding their engine themselves. But actually, what we see here, we have a lot of customers which are buying kits or parts from us, and they're always asking again, Jan, is there something where I should really look into it? And I would say, after we saw a lot of engine failures back in the days, we are also not perfect, so we have also engine failures, and we will make a next video about an engine which we built it up and which blowed up on track. Actually, it did not blow up in the way that a rod came out of the block, it just is not turning anymore. But yeah, what we see a lot on the biggest failures which we have, and we just make the magic number 10, so we say it's the 10 biggest engine failures when you're building up a BP or a B6 engine. Let's start on the ground of the engine. So let's turn that baby around. So first of all, the first thing what we see here, this engine is not machined, so there's a little bit of paint down here. This will be back machined that you cannot see it anymore, or this is back straight. But this is not a problem, so this is actually more like when you do the paint job and you do the block nicely. The first thing what we see a lot is when you are plumping in your, get me one. You have the little oil squirters which are connecting down there to this place. I do know if it's now the right one for that engine block. I didn't look if it's a BP04 or a BP4W or a BPD engine, but yeah, we have this little oil squirters, and a lot of people, they're dropping them in, but they do not look that they are perfectly angled, and then you see a lot of times that they hit the bottom side of the piston and they crack, and when they crack they do not work anymore like they should be, and you get oil pressure problems. So first of all, this is something we see probably 3 or 4 times a year. So check your gap and check that when you are turning your engine on your engine stand, that you have space there, and that the piston side is not touching the oil squirter. Next point. When you have your main bearings, so these are main bearings from LF, but just to show you the problem, when you drop your main bearing in, you have a little, there we probably need a main bearing for a BP, that's probably better to explain. Let's see where we have one. Because actually funny, because this engine got the same problem. So actually, yeah, I just show you with a Duratec bearing in the block. So it's mainly important that when you drop in your main bearing, that it's sitting nicely, and that this little notch is sitting there where the notch has to go. So when the notch is there, there's also the notch, drop it back in there. So I would say normally it's absolutely normal to make it like this, but we see that failure about 10, they're down there, they are BP. Just so there's a perfect, because this engine got that failure, and this is something we see about 8 to 10 times a year, so this is really common. We saw also people which are cutting or sanding this little nose, and then they drop it not in like this, so that this part sits where it has to go. They drop it in like this. So first of all, you will have no oil on the main bearing, and the second problem is when you drop it in like this, or when you drop it wrong in, the angle of your bearing is wrong. Also really common. Now we just come to the next bearing, which is also a common failure. Rod piston bearing. So what we see a lot, that also the people do not look where the notches are. When the notch is there, drop the bearing to the notch. Everything is good. And also beware, a bearing have to sit in like this. Not like this, not like this, or even not like this. So it should sit right in the notch on top of the bottom. And then, really important part, look for your specs, torque specs for your bearings or for your rods. We see a lot of people which are talking on, make the torquing of their rod bearing, they do it too tight, they do it too loose, and then this part here is not round, so it's actually more like oval, and it will not turn nicely in the crank. On the engine stand it will turn nicely, but when you are turning up the engine, it's doing 2000, 3000 or actually 7000 RPM on the boost or at the natural aspirated engine, it will destroy itself. Also really common. So now we come to, this is more like a mainly thing about building engines. Now we come to a part which is really BP and B6 like. We talked about that back in the days. Always I recommend, please check your oil pump. If your oil pump is really hard used, this one is like, you can think about using it again. You have some marks here which are not that problem, but you have some outer marks here. Here's one deep. You have, I would not use that one again and would replace it, and I would really go check the inside of your pump. And when you're installing the new pump gears, use fill that up with oil, and we also use grease, and drop also grease in, because when you run the pump gears already with the starter without oil, it takes about 2 to 3 or 4 seconds until the oil is in there. And when this part is running with 200 RPM, metal on metal on metal, it's getting so hot, and your new pump is directly hot. So always drop grease into it, drop oil into it. This is really important. We talked about in a video before that there is another problem. So this is actually from a V6, but it's basically the same part. So this part sits down here on the, it's a little bit longer from Mazda, but this part sits down here and connects to this part of the oil pump, like this. So we talked about the oil pump. This is the oil pickup. It's really important actually that this oil pickup is working fine. The oil pickup connects to this part and is screwed to the bottom part of the engine. So this sealing with this little gasket here is really important. We see a lot of people reusing that gasket. Never do that. If this gasket is leaking and is not working like it should be, you will have blow by around this part, and your oil pressure is special on high RPM, 0.7, 1 bar, 2 bars less than it should be. This will cause you engine damage right away. Especially when the oil is hot, something around 115 degrees. You're standing on a red traffic light or you're standing in the pit box, you will have no oil pressure on the engine. First problem. So this is something we see also a lot. Next thing, that thing is fucked. What is it? Is it oil? Is it silicone? Is it gaskets? Is it whatever? But as you can see and you can imagine, no oil is going through that anymore. Do not reuse that. Order it new from Mazda, it's not that expensive. Get it and drop it in. Next problem, these oil lines, they really like to break up here on this part. Always check if this is nice and round. Use a little bit of air, drop it in and feel if it's leaking here, and check it with your eyes carefully. What is that? Why is silicone hanging here? Why silicone stuff is hanging there? I can tell you right away. I know Mazda is telling you in the book how to build up an engine, always use silicone, always use Dirco or whatever. But be careful with it. Just make a little thin part. Line. Yes, thin line. Drop it on, make the next thin line, drop it on, and you're good to go. Always when you see that your silicone or your Dirco is coming this way out of your engine block, it will be also this way in the engine block. And the part outside of the engine block is not nice looking, but the part inside the engine is actually not nice looking, first of all, and the next thing, it will cause an engine damage because all that silicone will stay up here and you will lose oil pressure. Rod bearings, main bearings, fucked. So beware not to use a lot. We mainly make a line here, and then there are some gaskets, especially the ones which you drop into the oil pan, just sitting right on top of here. We just leak it also in a bit of silicone, and then we drop it in, torque it up, that was it. And when there's coming a little bit out of the block on the side, let's say 2 or 3 millimeters, perfect, because then it's coming also in the inside and everything is good. This is the way we do it, and everything is perfect. So this is on the one side. So this is actually the main stuff we see on the bottom of the engine. Now, a lot of people say, my engine is consuming oil after I replace the rings. And this is actually a problem, not by the rings, like a lot of people thinking. It's not a problem by the bore or horning of the engine or boring of the engine. It's not a problem of the piston. It's mainly a problem of cleaning the piston itself. So if you are, let's get the second ring out. So mostly, and that you can see here perfectly, the second ring, there's a lot of oil and dirt and whatever is always in that lines. We take about 3 to 4 hours to clean our pistons up completely and clean them complete and then drop them in. Otherwise you will not have a perfect sealing of the rings, and actually what you will have, like you can see here, you will have no pre-pressure in the oil support ring, because it cannot move like it has to move because there is dirt. So always beware that you're cleaning up this part of the piston absolutely nicely and perfectly. It cannot be too clean, just as a tip. So this is also a main part. Now we're coming up to the engine. So actually on the head gasket, when the engine is nice machined and the block is nice machined, we do not ever see a problem with the head gasket. What we see kind of a lot is wrong cutted valves. First of all, you cannot cut valves on a BP engine, which means, let's take a valve. You have this part, and this part connects to the engine head, and it's sealing to the
head?
No, it's sealing to the head, and it keeps the compression in the engine or in the cylinder. A lot of machine shops for engine, they cut this part and say, okay, you cut it, drop it back in, everything's good. You will have about 2,000 kilometers, you will have fun with your engine, and then you are fucked. Because the problem is, these valves, they are not hardened through, they are just top hardened, which means when you cut them, you have no hard part anymore, so this will worn out so fast you cannot even think about. We made a video about pre-pressure of the springs. This is something we're talking now about. This is a valve which was cutted, and it's, as you can see, it wasn't long running, but you can see here that there's extreme edge. So these extreme edges which we have here down on the valve, this is a big problem because it will worn out so fast. So what we are doing, we have hardened valves made for us, one thing. We just use them like always when you're building up engines back in the days. What we do, we use always when we are building up engines back in the days. We drop them in and then we just do it like this, old school, and just rub them in with that special grease or that special valve, I think it's valve lube or whatever. Just drop it in and do that. And you're absolutely good to go. Do not do more. Otherwise you can rebuild your head in the next 2,000 kilometers. Exhaust side. Always check your exhaust valve seats and check your exhaust valves. You can cut the exhaust valves, that's no problem because they are completely hardened through. But always check that your seat is fine, that it's sealing perfectly and all that stuff. Otherwise you have a problem that you will lose compression on one part of the cylinder. So, next problem. Everybody knows lifter tick on the MX-5s. I think there's a 12-hour video about lifting tick on Miatas. So you know about the lifting problem or the lifter tick noise problem. What we do, we just clean the hydros, that's it. We never took them apart, we never overhauled them. We had customers doing that. I always recommend to clean them with oil, pump them a bit, get them back in. If you have a little bit of lifter tick, keep it where it is. It's not that big problem. Nothing will wear out, nothing will worn out. If you want to buy new hydros, always buy them by Mazda in new. Never use a used one. Yeah, how to torque in a camshaft, I think that's not a big deal. Always seal up your engine, or when you are using a new valve cover gasket, always drop a bit of Durco or silicone up here. And here is something you can really see what we talk about in the blog. When it's looking like this on the outside, it's actually looking also like this on the inside. So, and this will fly into the head like this and will go down to the bottom and will stay there on the oil pickup. Always use OEM seals, and this is probably the most important part of all. Never, never, never use the sealing of a third-party company. It will not, the engine will always lose oil, it will never be completely dry, it will always lose oil. And now the last part, which is also really important. I cannot show you an engine here because we have no engine with the front cover opened. When you do your timing belt change, always drop the timing belt on, turn it 3 rounds, so 3 whole rounds of the engine, takes about 2 minutes, and check it again. Most time what you will see that the exhaust side is always turned by 1 tooth and the engine is not running properly. So this is the 10 most failures which you have, or which we see when somebody is overhauling his engine, is doing the timing belt change or changing gaskets. So I told you what we saw a lot, or what we see a lot, we just should check, and all the other stuff is just maintenance. Do it nicely, do it clean, work in a good place or in a clean place, and overhaul your engine. One thing which is not a common failure, I think this is a failure which is everywhere, we will make an extra video about it. Never sandblast any part of your engine. Who will tell you this is good? Say, okay, if he had one time luck, he is lucky. But I can tell you right away, every engine which we had in here which saw something like sand or sandblasting material, all these engines broke after 2000 kilometers. But this will be an extra video where we'll talk about what will happen to an engine if you sandblast it and you will have still sand in your engine.
Yeah, there was a comment this week. If you have to blast your engine, use salt, because that builds a solution in water and oil.
Yeah.
Just salt.
Yeah.
Blast it.
Yeah. That's it. Do it like this. What we do, we just clean them up completely. We just drop them in the washing machine. They are not so perfectly looking absolutely new, I know that. But then I know these engines last for forever and we have no problems. But I will show you 2 engines which we have here, which were sandblasted, and they break down, one on the dyno, one on the track. So the next will be about what will happen if you sandblast your engine. See you then. Bye.